Millionaire humiliates family, insulting immigrant waitress at Gala with shocking twist. The grand ballroom in downtown Manhattan buzzed like a live wire. Crystal chandeliers spilled light like waterfalls, casting sparkling rainbows on polished marble floors. Laughter echoed off golden walls, mingling with the soft clink of glasses filled with expensive champagne. The city's richest had gathered to toast charity, but beneath the surface, greed and power danced just as fiercely. Jonathan Mercer stepped through the crowd like a storm, his sharp eyes scanning every angle, his smile as cold and quick as a blade. Everyone knew his name. Everyone feared his wit. But no one saw the line tonight until it was crossed. Maria wiped sweat from her brow, balancing 3 plates in one hand, weaving between towering heels and tuxedos. An immigrant from Mexico, she carried hope wrapped in exhaustion, her dream of a better life flickering in the depths of her tired eyes. She kept a steady run. The room froze. Jonathan's mask cracked. His voice thundered, slicing through the hum of the gala. "Watch yourself." His words sharp as shattered glass. His gaze burned into Maria like a brand. "Do you know who you're serving? Or are you too busy dreaming in the dirt you came from?" The room fell deadly silent. Eyes jumped from his face to hers, wide with shock. The electricity in the air thickened, charged with disbelief and whispers. Maria's heart pounded, hard, loud, thudding in her ears. Her hands trembled. She swallowed a lump the size of a stone, desperate not to break. Not here, not in front of all these strangers. People shifted uncomfortably. A low murmur threaded through the crowd. "That was cruel," someone whispered. Another voice hissed, "He went too far." Maria forced her chin up, breath shaky but steady, her lips pressed tight. The humiliating sting spread like poison from her skin into her soul. Then, like lightning cutting through a storm, a figure emerged from the shadows of the crowd. A man, tall and calm, with eyes that held secrets buried deep. He moved with quiet authority, stopping just behind Maria. The room's tension snapped with a new electricity, different, heavier. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, recognition flickered, and fear. Maria's gaze locked with the stranger's. His look held something fierce, protection, but also a warning. The kind of warning that changes everything. Because this wasn't just some random helper. He knew her story, a story Jonathan Mercer never wanted anyone to hear. A past tangled with power, pain, and a promise Jonathan had tried to bury. The gala's glittering surface cracked, revealing wounds beneath. What secrets was this stranger protecting? What explosive truth lurked in Maria's past, ready to topple the empire Jonathan built on ruthless deals and whispered lies? A breath caught in the ballroom. A night that promised luxury and charity, twisted into a battlefield of secrets and shadows, and no one could guess what would come next. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube canceled their subscriptions without warning. Just check out the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like. It helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love meeting all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes a difference. Let's interact. The room held its breath, the air thick with tension. Jonathan Mercer stood, frozen in shock, his throat tightening like a fist. The stranger's gaze was unwavering, and Maria sensed an expectation building around them, Like the eye of a storm, murmurs rippled through the crowd. As guests shared confused glances, eyebrows raised, they could all feel it. The shift, the undeniable turn of fate. A moment passed, then another. "Who are you?" Jonathan managed, the bravado in his voice faltering. But before he could question any further, the stranger took a step closer to Maria. The weight of his presence, comforting yet dangerous. "Let's not play games," he said, his voice low and steady. "We both know why I'm here." The words hovered like a guillotine, ready to drop. Maria's heart raced. She didn't dare take her eyes off him. The stranger surveyed the crowd, challenging anyone to intervene. He turned back to Jonathan, his expression fierce. "You have something that belongs to her." Jonathan's face darkened. "You don't have a clue what you're talking about. Step back, or I'll have you thrown out." But the atmosphere shifted again. The unyielding gaze of the stranger faltered for just the briefest moment, revealing a flicker of fear beneath his calm. And then, the unexpected happened. With a sudden crack, the ballroom doors swung open, and in burst a group of police officers, uniforms crisp and badges shining. The crowd gasped, the elegant air thick with disbelief. The officers moved deliberately, cutting through the spectacle, eyes scanning the room. "What's going on here?" one of them boomed, stepping forward and gripping the edge of a table for balance. All eyes turned toward Jonathan, the source of the chaos. He leaned back, shock paralyzing him momentarily. "You can't be serious. This is a private event." "We have a warrant for the arrest of Jonathan Mercer," the officer declared, voice firm. "We need to speak to you about allegations of fraud and embezzlement." Gasps erupted around them. Jonathan's face paled, eyes darting from one incredulous guest to another. "This is preposterous," he shouted, but his voice quaked, revealing the cracks in his facade. But the stranger stepped forward again. A hint of triumph played on his lips, and for a brief moment, Maria thought she saw a glimmer of hope. "That's right, Jonathan. Your empire is crumbling, and it's all thanks to her." Jonathan's expression twisted with dread, realization dawning like a slow-motion car crash. "What do you mean?" His voice dropped to a whisper, fear pooling in his eyes. "What does she have to do with any of this?" The tension hung thick, and Maria's mind raced. What had this man done? What secrets did he hold? "Everything," he said, his tone low. "It started with her, and it ends with you." Just then, a flash of recognition ignited in Jonathan's eyes, a brief acknowledgement, his worst nightmare come alive. And in that instant, the truth hung in the air, heavy and electric. But Maria still didn't understand. What binded her to the man who had humiliated her? The truth felt just out of reach, a dark shroud over their fates. As Jonathan stared at her, the world blurred around them. Each heartbeat echoed a question. Would she take a stand? Would she reclaim her power? Before anyone could breathe, an urgent voice broke through the silence. "Maria," it called, resonating from the crowd. "You need to tell them now." Tension crackling, Maria turned to the stranger, then back at Jonathan. The room felt alive, a battlefield of secrets, and she stood at the center, ready to uncover the truth that might shatter everything. But would she reveal what lay buried deep within her past? The moment trembled on the edge of revelation, and all eyes focused on her, ready for what would unfold. What would she choose to unveil? What darkness lingered just below the surface? As she opened her mouth to speak, the ballroom held its breath once more. The ballroom held its breath, the air thick with tension. Jonathan Mercer looked trapped. He was a cornered animal, his bravado slipping away with every second. But beneath the chaos, Maria sensed something deeper, a connection to this stranger that shook her core. "Maria," the stranger urged again, and all eyes turned toward her. expectant, desperate. The whisper swirled around them, a sea of confusion. She felt her heart hammering, fighting against the weight of the moment. This was her chance, her moment to stand up against the man who had humiliated her. But just then, as she opened her mouth, the lights flickered. The grand ballroom dimmed, the sound of laughter fading into a chilling silence. Everyone's gaze shot upward, confusion etched on their faces. Then came the crack, a sharp sound, like lightning splitting the sky. The chandelier overhead began to sway, its crystal prisms shimmering dangerously. The crowd gasped, eyes wide, as the lights surged back to life. But it wasn't just the lights. The air felt heavy, electrified, and suddenly chaos erupted. With a deafening crash, the chandelier broke free from its moorings, plummeting down with a thunderous roar. Time felt suspended, each heartbeat amplified as people screamed, scattering in all directions. Tables toppled, drinks spilled, and fine china shattered. Maria's instincts kicked in. She ducked and covered her head, feeling the rush of air as the chandelier crashed just feet away from her, a sudden storm of shattered glass and crystal raining down. The crowd, once filled with high society's laughter, was now a frantic mob. People clawed at each other to escape, heels cracked against marble, tuxedos now smeared with panic and debris. But as the chaos surged, the stranger was still at her side. His face, normally so calm, was now a mask of determination. He pulled her down behind a table, shielding her from the tour. "Stay low," he commanded, his voice barely cutting through the chaos. Maria nodded, heart racing, but she felt the heat of something brewing, something more than just the panic around them. The dust began to settle. The screams faded to shocked whispers. The earth had shifted, and in that moment, as silence fell over the chaos, Maria saw Jonathan. He stood frozen, his face ashen, vulnerability creeping into the cracks of his icy demeanor. The police officers approached, still bewildered, but one had pulled out a radio, calling for backup. "We need paramedics. There are injuries." But everything changed in the dim light, framed by the wreckage of the chandelier. Maria's gaze flickered back to the stranger beside her. There was something in his eyes. Recognition, understanding, and at once a glimmer of fear. "Jonathan Mercer is hiding something much worse than you think," he whispered urgently. "You aren't just collateral damage. You're pivotal to this entire disgrace." Her heart dropped. What could he mean? Before she could ask, Jonathan's voice rose above the rest, breaking through the daze. "You think you can ruin me? This is all a setup." And just when Maria thought it couldn't get any crazier, a figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the room, calm in the chaos. An older woman, silver hair shining, moved with an air of authority. She surveyed the scene with calculating eyes. And then she said something that halted everyone in their tracks. "Enough. The truth is about to come out." Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of years. Jonathan's eyes widened with a mix of horror and recognition. "You shouldn't be here." His voice shook. The woman stepped forward, the shift in the atmosphere palpable. "You don't get to decide that anymore. Maria deserves to know what happened, and so does everyone else." Suddenly, Maria felt the ground quake beneath her, an unearthly blend of urgency and impending revelation. What secrets lay in this woman's words? As she turned to the stranger, his expression mirrored hers, both searching for answers in a storm that twisted their lives together in ways none of them could yet understand. Would this moment reveal the truth? Or would it plunge them deeper into the shadows of Jonathan's world? Everything teetered on the edge, waiting for the final reveal, for the keystone in a grand design that threatened to unravel them all. Maria's heart raced as she stood at the center of chaos. The older woman's voice echoed in her ears, a rallying cry against the storm brewing around them. But Jonathan Mercer's expression, a blend of fear, anger, and disbelief, captured her attention more than anything. Enough! The truth is about to come out. People held their breath. Families huddled closer, exchanging glances. The air felt thick, charged with anticipation, with fear. "Maria," the stranger urged, his eyes pleading. "You need to tell them now." But before she could summon her voice, the ballroom doors burst open again, revealing a young woman with fiery red hair, rushing in breathlessly. "No," she shouted, her voice cutting through the panic like a knife. The room turned toward her, whispers igniting among the crowd. "Claire?" Jonathan's voice shook, confusion rippling through him as he realized the identity of the intruder. His daughter. Panic turned into horror in an instant. "Why are you here?" he barked. "I came to get you. It's not safe here," Claire called, her eyes darting nervously between her father and the stranger. But there was more in her voice. Something desperate. Something that hinted at forbidden knowledge. Maria's heart thudded painfully, grasping for understanding. "What do you mean it's not safe?" Claire's luminous eyes met Maria's, filled with urgency. "You don't know, do you? None of us do. You don't know who he is." Jonathan flinched. "Shut your mouth," he shouted, but panic was creeping into his tone. The stranger's face hardened, casting a shadow over the once assured demeanor. "She's right. You deserve the truth." He stepped closer, carrying an unspoken weight that anchored the room. Before Maria could process the unfolding drama, Claire spoke again, her voice rising. "You think you can control everything, don't you? But you don't know what's lurking in the shadows, Dad." In that moment, the walls of the ballroom seemed to close in, holding every person in a chokehold of tense anticipation, sketching electric lines between father and daughter. "Enough," Jonathan barked, but uncertainty flickered behind his icy blue eyes, revealing there was more to uncover. "You shouldn't speak this way." But Claire stood firm. "I have to. Maria, he's not just a man you crossed paths with. He's connected to our family, connected to you." The air thickened, as if the world held its breath. "What do you mean?" Maria forced out, her voice trembling. Then Claire's words cut through the silence like glass shards. "You're not who you think you are. You're—" Before she could finish, the crowd gasped again. A resounding thud echoed through the room, as a figure from the back emerged, dragging a laptop behind him, a battered device that had clearly seen better days. "Where is the evidence, Jonathan?" The newcomer boomed. He was stocky, his clothes slightly rumpled, but his voice carried authority. "It's time to end your games." Jonathan's facade shattered. "You!" Desperation clawed at his voice, but the newcomer pressed forward, dropping the laptop onto a nearby table, flinging it open. Inside the gleaming device, dozens of documents flickered to life. "The truth about your illicit dealings is right here," he declared, eyes blazing with determination. All eyes moved from the screen to Jonathan's rising terror. "How did you get that?" Jonathan hissed, eyes narrowing, as his empire began to crumble around him. And before the room could process the double betrayal, the father's connection to the stranger, and Claire's role in revealing the plot, the screens began to display images of Jonathan, entangled in contracts, intertwined with shady figures. His world spun as secrets unfurled, like curtains pulled back from a deep darkness. What secrets had Claire stumbled upon? What role did the stranger play in this twisted saga? The energy shifted, morphing, until someone shouted from the back, "We need to get out of here. This place is cursed." But as the urgency rose, Maria stood frozen, every truth spun like a web around her. She felt pulled into the center of it all, grasping for answers she was unprepared to face. What lay ahead as the weight of the revelations tangled around them? Would she emerge unscathed, or forever changed by the truths clawing their way into the open. Silenced, the ballroom transformed into a battleground of shattered identities and unexpected alliances. And as the hour approached midnight, everything began to unravel, leaving Maria at the heart of a storm. Teetering on the precipice of understanding and fear, Maria could barely process the whirlwind of revelations. The crowd shifted, whispers swirling like smoke. Jonathan Moser was a master of deceit, but suddenly his world seemed to be crumbling. Her heart raced. What did Claire mean? But there was no time to ponder. The stranger beside her, eyes fierce, pressed forward. "This is about more than just you and Jonathan. It's bigger than you can imagine." The laptop screen flickered, showing documents filled with crooked deals. The police officers were still scrambling, trying to untangle the mess Jonathan had created. The tension coiled tighter, each word heavier than the last. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. The emergency lights pulsed to life, casting a dim, eerie glow. Gasps echoed as everyone shielded their eyes against the sudden change. Then came the terrible screeching sound, a roar like a train derailing. Without warning, the ballroom doors burst open again, and a group of masked individuals surged in, brandishing weapons. "Get down!" one of them shouted, voice muffled as panic erupted. Screams filled the air, a symphony of terror. The crowd scattered, throwing themselves behind tables and slamming into walls, confusion escalating to chaos. Maria's heart dropped. She ducked, her instincts kicking in. The stranger shielded her, embodying calm amidst the storm. But Jonathan, once the epitome of control, was now a man unraveling. "Claire, get behind me!" he yelled, but his daughter had already dashed to her mother's side. A woman who had silently emerged from the shadows, starkly out of place. "What are you doing here?" Jonathan's voice cracked, panic rising. "Saving you," she shot back, eyes burning with rage and fear. "This is all your fault." But before anyone could process the unfolding drama, one of the masked figures stepped forward. "Jonathan Mercer, you have something that belongs to us," the voice declared, chilling everyone to the bone. Maria glanced at the stranger, understanding dawning like a storm. "They're after him, but for what?" "Not just him," the stranger answered, his voice low but urgent. "They're here for you too, Maria. You're tied into all of this." In that instant, a memory flickered across Maria's thoughts. Her childhood, running through the dusty streets of her hometown. Laughter filling the air, a safe haven far removed from this living nightmare. The higher stakes were unfurling, dragging her back into a dark web woven of secrets. Her secrets. Why would they want me?" she stammered, disbelief flooding her veins. The answer shattered like glass around her. "Because of your heritage, your blood," the stranger said, stepping closer as if trying to shield her from the storm approaching. "You're more than you think. You're connected to Jonathan in ways you never knew." The revelation hit Maria like a freight train. "What? No, that can't be!" But the masked figures were advancing, and behind them, uproar broke out as guests continued to flee. Claire held her mother's hand tightly, eyes wide with disbelief, but a flicker of recognition flashed between them. "Jonathan," Claire whispered. But now their roles flipped. She stood strong, ready to defend the truth. "We deserve to know." But amidst the chaos, another voice rang out, piercing through the fear. It was the older woman, now pushing her way to the front. "Enough! This is bigger than family ties. It's about survival. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Suddenly, the masked leader stepped closer, his voice dripping with malice. "We're here for justice, and we will make sure the entire world knows what you've been hiding. Jonathan and his little secret." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "What secret?" The leader's gaze flicked to Jonathan, seething with desire for retribution. The past is catching up to you. Your legacy ends today. A bombshell dropped. Jonathan staggered back, anger and fear twisting his features. You don't know what you're talking about. But the crowd began to murmur again, glancing between the leader and Jonathan as the truth clawed its way into the light. Claire's expression hardened, her eyes reflecting a painful understanding. Maria felt the weight of everyone's gaze, the tension palpable as the room dissolved into turmoil. The masks, the betrayal, and the truth endlessly twisting into something she couldn't comprehend. Could it all just be a coincidence? Or was her life tied to Jonathan's tangled web of deceit, far more deeply than she ever imagined? The whisper of connection lingered, chilling her very bones, as everything around them trembled on the brink of catastrophe. Would she step forward and face the dread rising like a tide, or hold back and let the storm swallow her whole? The urgency in the air grew thicker, swirling like a tempest ready to explode. Maria felt every heartbeat thrum in her chest as she stood frozen, words caught in her throat. The crowd trembled, whispers echoing around her. Flut. She shouted at her father, voice trembling with fury. Your past is here. It's catching up with you. The masked figures advanced, weapons drawn, casting long shadows over every person in the room. Tension electrified the air, a horrible kind of energy that felt dangerously alive. Maria's gaze flitted between them and Jonathan, breathing hard, all of this spiraling out of her control. Suddenly, one of the masked figures raised a hand, signaling for quiet. Jonathan Mercer. Your empire ends tonight, he declared, voice cold and precise. The crowd gasped, fear rippling like a wave. But Jonathan pressed back, panic flashing across his features. You don't know what you're doing. His voice shook, betraying him. I can help you. Help, the leader sneered, stepping forward. The only thing you can offer is shadows and lies. We want the truth. Before Jonathan could respond, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into near darkness, the emergency lighting casting an ominous glow. As shadows danced, a heavy silence draped over the thrumming chaos. And then it happened. A loud crack echoed. The laptop fell, slamming shut as the figures advanced. They lunged. And without warning, an explosion erupted outside the ballroom. Glass shattered and debris rained down. Lights flickered briefly, and screams pierced the air. People dove for cover, panic erupting in a way Maria had never before witnessed. The masked intruders ducked instinctively, confusion flashing across their faces. Jonathan seized the moment. Run, he yelled, eyes darting wildly. But Maria stood still, transfixed. The truth hung heavy in the air, unspoken yet tangible. Why would they have come for me? She whispered, panic creeping back in. From the chaos, the leader bellowed. We came for her because she's the key. Everyone froze. What did he mean? A pulse of dread shot through Maria. The revelation shifted the very ground beneath her. Key to what? Jonathan spat, fury creeping back into his voice. The leader pointed at Maria, anger bubbling beneath his controlled demeanor. Your daughter. She's the proof we need. The evidence of your crimes runs through her veins. Time stopped. Maria staggered back, heart pounding, feeling the walls close in. What? She gasped, shock rippling through her. What do you mean, my daughter? And that it hit her like a freight train. The weight of the world fell upon her shoulders, locking her into a moment thick with horror. Could it be true? Did Jonathan Mercer have a daughter? Claire took a step forward, her brows knitted together, the tension between them snapping like a rubber band stretched too far. No, that's not true. But the masked leader continued, his voice rising above the chaos. "This woman contains the truth hidden in the heart of your empire, Mercer. The daughter you abandoned. The bloodline you tried to erase." Gasps broke through the crowd, rippling shock saturating the air. Maria's heart hammered. Mind racing to understand. Was it possible? Claire's expression twisted, realization dawning in horror. "What? No, you're lying." But there it was. The truth yelled from the shadows, revealing Jonathan's darkest secret. The room became a tempest of confusion, fear giving way to rising disgust. Maria stood there stunned, tangled in lies and revelations. What did this all mean? What had she stumbled into? She looked at Jonathan, who seemed lost now, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. This can't be. As the air sang with uncertainty and rising tension, Maria's world began to tilt. Everything she thought was true slipped through her fingers like sand. What lay ahead in this chaos? Would she uncover more lost connections? Or would the truth threaten to destroy everything she held dear? Suddenly, amid the cacophony, everything shifted again. A sound echoed, this time distinct, a voice from the back of the crowd. "You don't have to hide anymore, Maria." The owner of the voice stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. The glint of recognition struck like lightning. An old friend from her past, long thought lost. And as Maria stared at her unlikely savior, the world around her began to spiral into a new, unimaginable reality. With everything now in question, all the unaddressed mysteries cascaded around her. Would she find the truth that could shatter or save her? Everything hung by a thread, waiting to unravel. Maria felt her heart race as the familiar face stepped forward from the chaos, breaking the tension like a thunderclap. Her old friend, Elena, had arrived, and the sight of her brought a torrent of memories flooding. But could she possibly bring the answers Maria so desperately needed now? "Maria, you need to understand," Elena shouted, her voice cutting through the fray. "What Jonathan has hidden, it's worse than you think." Jonathan's face twisted with anger and helplessness as he stared at Elena, recognition crumbling his facade. "You shouldn't be here. You have no idea what he's involved in." But Elena stood her ground, eyes fierce. "No, Jonathan, you don't control this anymore. Maria deserves the truth." A buzzing silence enveloped the room, thick with anticipation. The masked figures paused, their attention shifting between the three of them. Maria's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down. What could Elena possibly know that would change everything? Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a loud bang echoed outside, the sound of sirens wailing closer, drowning out the fear palpable in the air. People began to scramble again, hearts racing, instincts kicking in. "Everyone, get to the exits!" A police officer yelled from the back, rushing in to take control of the chaos. But the storm was already brewing within the ballroom. One of the masked figures shifted, clearly agitated by the approaching law enforcement. "We don't have time for this," he shouted, shifting nervously. But it wasn't just chaos on the surface. There was something deeper, more sinister. Maria clutched Elena's arm, breath hitching in her throat. "What's going on?" Elena's eyes widened, filled with urgency. "I didn't just come here for you, Maria. I came to expose the truth about your family, about who your father really is." Dread pooled in Maria's stomach. "What do you mean?" But before Elena could answer, one of the masked figures lunged forward, grabbing Jonathan by the collar and dragging him closer. "This is your fault. You played a fall." "Stop! You don't know what you're doing!" Jonathan shouted. His voice shaky but firm. The crowd held its breath, each person frozen in a moment that felt immense. Maria stood at the axis of the chaos, unease splintering through her, the pieces of the puzzle she had long sought to understand nearly within her grasp. And just when it felt like the truth would finally come to light, Another bang erupted. A hit to the door so powerful it splintered the wood, throwing it open. Through the doorway strode not just police officers, but a figure clad in a sharp suit. A small army of law enforcement behind him. "Freeze!" he commanded, voice laced with authority. Everyone turned, heads turned slowly as they realized who had entered. "Detective Parker?" Elena gasped, face paling. The man stepped further in, face unreadable, eyes finding Jonathan's. "You're under arrest for conspiracy and fraud, Mercer. Your sins are finally catching up." Maria's breath hitched. A wave of conflicting emotions surged within her. Was the promise of justice at last here? But then she saw Jonathan's eyes. Fearful, desperate, but also something else. Rage. In an explosive moment, Jonathan turned to Elena, voice shrill with betrayal. You've orchestrated this whole mess." Their relationship, seemingly a master plan in the shadows, took a dark turn Maria couldn't comprehend. Jonathan turned to Maria, desperation flooding his voice. "You don't understand, Maria. They're after the legacy. They'll turn you against me. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her." But just then, a shot rang out. A deafening crack filled the room. Chaos erupted. Screams tore through the air as one masked figure fell, dragging others down in a flurry. Maria's heart raced with fear as bodies surged around her, confusion spiraling. And in that precise moment, truth hit her. Everything she thought she knew, everything she trusted, was unraveling before her very eyes. Did Jonathan believe his own lies? Was Elena truly there to help? Or was she tangled in her own deception? Through the chaos, Maria felt a surge, something primal. The truth she had sought for so long was now a living beast, hungry, roaring to be unleashed. But would she emerge from this place as a victim or a victor? As the dust began to settle, the pieces became clear, yet disturbingly murky. Would the truth protect her or betray her? And what of Jonathan? Was he truly the villain in this tale? Or just another man caught in the web of secrets that now threatened to swallow them all? Everything felt like a delicate thread, teetering on the edge, waiting for someone to pull it apart. The dust began to settle as the chaos morphed into a frantic wave of confusion. Maria stood on the knife's edge of a storm, her heart racing as she absorbed the shocking revelations. Jonathan, once an aura of confidence, now transformed into a man cornered, frantically darting his eyes between threats and shadows. But just as the story seemed to reach its boiling point, something unimaginable happened. A sudden crash resounded from the entrance, the kind that turned heads and silenced everything. The doors burst open once more, but this time it wasn't just police or chaos. It was a woman, slender, fierce, and unmistakably familiar. The crowd gasped, each voice like a gasp of wind in the approaching storm. "Mom?" Claire's voice broke, trembling on the edge of disbelief. The woman rushed in, her long hair flowing like a dark tide. The air felt charged with electricity as she "You thought you could escape me forever, didn't you?" she spat, voice as sharp as glass. Jonathan's face fell, a mix of panic and dread transforming his features. "You shouldn't be here, Eva. This isn't the time." But Eva didn't waver. "The time is now, Jonathan, and you know it better than anyone." Her breathing quickened with rage, fueled by years of betrayal. "You've been lying to all of us." Maria's heart raced, confused. Who was this woman? What truth had she walked into? Standing at the crossroads of lies and deceit. Eva pointed a finger at Maria, her voice gaining power, echoing through the ballroom. "You're more than just another pawn in Jonathan's sick game. You're—" "Stop!" Jonathan thundered, but the words flew over him like arrows. Eva's gaze remained steady. "You're his daughter, Maria. You are the child he abandoned before Claire was even born." The revelation hit like a tidal wave, hard, cold, and suffocating. Maria staggered back, the ground slipping away beneath her feet. What? A lump rose in her throat, a mixture of disbelief and shock. The truth reverberated deep inside her, but her mind struggled to comprehend. Claire's eyes widened, disbelief morphing into something else. Anger. Pain. You lied to me, Dad! All these years! Jonathan's tall frame seemed to shrink, the weight of the truth collapsing. No, it's a lie, he shouted, desperation clawing at his voice. You're both wrong. But the crowd held its breath, the air thick with tension. It was as if the very walls were closing in, everyone enveloped in the storm of Jonathan's chaotic secrets. Faces turned toward Maria, seeking answers. Eyes flickered with sympathy, confusion, and judgment. Get away from her! Claire shouted at Eva, stepping protectively in front of Maria, as fierce as a lioness. Maria felt a rush of gratitude, but was also paralyzed by uncertainty. Enough! Eva's voice crackled, raw with emotion. You need to know the truth, Maria. You symbolize everything he's discarded. You carry his legacy, damage and all. You're rightful heir to an empire built on lies. As echoes of shock rippled through the crowd, one of the masked figures shifted. You don't have time for this. The cops are closing in. Panic surged, electrifying the room once more. Chaos erupted anew as the realization sank in. Jonathan was losing control, exposed, his empire unraveling like an old thread in a worn-out fabric. He clenched his fists, his eyes wild, darting between figures that had suddenly transformed into enemies he couldn't control. Don't listen to her! This is absurd! He shouted at all of them. But deep inside, Maria could see the fracture shimmering through Jonathan's mask. Then Eva took a step closer. Her face softened, desperation spilling out. You need to know how much you matter, how your existence can change everything, if you let it. But before Maria could grasp the enormity of this moment, the door flew open yet again. Another figure rushed in, a police officer, panting, desperate. We can't handle this mob. We need everyone to evacuate. But Maria stood paralyzed, caught in the web of revelation, and the room pulsed with a life of its own. With her whole identity cracking like fragile glass, a clamor around her puffed, confusion erupting into panic and fear. The truth lay bare, but everything felt balanced on a knife's edge, teetering toward chaos. As sirens wailed closer, Maria's world spun faster and faster, unraveling all she thought was true. Would she embrace this new reality? Or would fear hold her tightly in a past she desperately wanted to escape? Everything hung in the balance as the storm continued to brew, dark and ominous. What would she choose to do next? Would this truth free her, or bind her in irreversible ways? The chaos around Maria swirled, noise and confusion bubbling like a boiling pot. Her heart raced as Elena stood firm, revealing her shocking claim. Was it true? Was she really Jonathan's daughter? Before Maria could process the implication, the ballroom doors burst open once more, but this time something frightening entered. A loud, clamoring figure with a familiar silhouette. It was Louis, the family lawyer. His face ghostly pale and eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Get out! We need to leave now! He shouted, urgency coating every word. But the desperate look on his face slammed into Maria with a thud, chilling her to the bone. Leave? Jonathan responded, incredulous. What are you talking about? There's no time. Louis's voice sliced through the chaos. The police aren't just here for you, Jonathan. They have warrants for all of us. A gasp echoed from Claire's mouth, emotion ricocheting through the crowd. Maria's breath hitched, knitting panic in her chest. What do you mean, all of us? She managed to ask, desperation flooding her words. But before Louis could reply, every phone in the room vibrated. their screens lighting up with urgent alerts. A chilling message flashed across each one. Warning: hostage situation at Gala. Immediate evacuation recommended. What? Maria whispered, her stomach dropping. The air thickened with dread, every face around her reflecting the shock and terror that seeped into the very walls. Loud shouts erupted, panic igniting like wildfires. People pushed and shoved toward the exits, chaos erupting all over again. But now, it wasn't just fear. It was pure terror. "Get behind me!" Jonathan shouted at Claire and Maria, throwing himself in front of them, the weight of protection falling unpleasantly heavy. But fury flickered behind his eyes, knowing that he might be the cause of this mayhem. Next to them, Elena's face twisted in worry. "What now, Jonathan? This is your fault too." Suddenly, the masked figures shifted, their weapons lower but equally menacing. "We need to split. Get the girl," one shouted, eyes locked on Maria, fear turning to grim determination. "Get away from her!" Claire jumped forward, fueled by protective fury. But the moment was shattered as a sudden crash echoed through the room. The chandelier teetered ominously before crashing to the ground. The shattering glass sending fragments flying everywhere. "All of you down!" Lewis yelled, diving behind a table. As people screamed and ducked, a surge of instinct propelled Maria toward the edge of the crowd. But just then, everything took a drastic turn. A figure appeared amidst the dust, something glimmering. A knife. It glinted under the emergency lights like a sharp tear in reality. Maria's breath caught as the masked leader strode forward, catching sight of her. "Enough games!" he growled, expression twisted. "You have something we need, and nobody's leaving until we get it." The crowd fell quiet, hearts pounding in synchronization, every eye fixed on him. But before any confrontation could unfold, another explosion echoed outside, shaking the very foundations of the building. The lights flickered dangerously, throwing the room into perilous shadows, a haunting tableau captured in time. Then, without warning, the masked leader raised his voice, projecting over the chaos. "Jonathan Mercer, you think you've won?" Jonathan's face paled as the masked man continued. "You're not just responsible for your destruction, Jonathan. You're tied to this whole dark web, and she," he pointed at Maria, "holds the key to your downfall." The accusation hung in the air, thick with accusation and fear. Maria felt something shatter inside her, but she couldn't grasp what it was. The truth surged, something devouring that small flicker of hope she still had. She turned, gasping as again she felt the weight of their gazes. And then, in a twist that rocked her reality, the lights flickered again. But this time, her surroundings turned eerie and hazy. Another figure emerged through the broken doorway, this one unmasked, someone she knew far too well. It was her mother, the woman who had vanished without a trace all those years ago. Disbelief spiraled, her heart racing with impossible questions. "Mom?" Maria seized the word, barely a whisper, trembling with hope and fear. "Maria, I'm here to save you!" Her mother's voice floated through the madness, weaving between Maria's shocking revelations and the chaos threatening to swallow them whole. The crowd held its breath, caught between fear and confusion. Jonathan shot a look at Eva, utter shock mingling with anger flashing through his eyes. "You never told me she was alive." In that moment, everything faltered. The room surged into chaos once more, the lines separating hero, villain, and victim blurred. Relationships spiraled into confusion, and Maria stood as the fulcrum of it all, caught between the unfolding storm. Her mother stepped closer, urgency mingling with dread. "We need to get out now. There's so much you don't know." And just like that, in a flurry of motion and shouts, the world spun out of balance. Maria needed answers, and yet the truth seemed to press harder, lurking just out of reach. Would this revelation sink her deeper into darkness or set her free to reclaim her life? What had been hidden in the shadows now danced enticingly close. The promise of understanding just beyond her grasp. Would Maria find the resilience to unravel everything that remained broken before it was too late? Maria stood frozen, her heart racing as her mother's words shattered her world once more. "I'm here to save you," echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain, amplifying uncertainty. Just when hope flickered, a loud crash jolted everyone. Police reinforcements barreled in, sirens howling outside, drowning the room in chaos. "Get out now," shouted the officer in charge, panic etched into every line of his face. The ballroom morphed into a frenzy, voices mingling into a storm of fear and confusion. People pushed toward any exit they could find, the desperate crowd now a swirling mass. But Jonathan's frantic gaze darted from her mother to the masked leader, caught between rage and desperation. "You think you can tear my family apart?" he spat, voice trembling. His mask of control had shattered, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. "Enough!" Eva's voice commanded attention, cutting through the pandemonium. "Jonathan, they're here for you, not just her. You need to tell them the truth." The tangled history between Jonathan and Eva hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Claire, distinguished only by her wide-eyed desperation, turned to Maria. The confusion etched on her face, transforming into something darker, more complex. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" Maria shot back, confused and shaken. Claire's expression twisted. "That she's your mother? That you might actually—" But before she could finish, a new figure emerged from the shadows. A middle-aged man, dressed sharply, his presence immediately commanding. It was Gregory Chen, Jonathan's right-hand man, a low tremor of fear threading through the crowd as they recognized him. "Gregory?" Jonathan's voice held an edge of betrayal. "How did you get in here?" With a cold smile, Gregory stepped forward, raising a hand. "You really think you could keep it all hidden forever?" His words dripped with disdain. "You didn't think I wouldn't find out about your little secret?" The room echoed with gasps. "Secret?" Aria whispered, trembling as the weight of confusion encased her. "I'm talking about not just who they are," Gregory continued, "but what you've been hiding all these years." The tension shifted like a tide, and Jonathan's eyes narrowed, the walls closing in on him. "You're in over your head, Gregory." "No." A cold smile crept across Gregory's face, one that dripped with malice. "You're the one who made the mistake. You see, Maria isn't just the daughter you abandoned. She's the heir to the family fortune and an ownership stake in the empire that you've built on lies. You have no idea what you've unleashed." In that moment, everything shifted. Maria felt the world tilt beneath her. Shock gripped her heart. Did she really hold the key to Jonathan's downfall? But before she could process, Gregory raised a sleek tablet that displayed images of documents incriminating Jonathan. Bank statements, contracts, and dark shadows lurking in every line. Gasps filled the air as the truth flickered blindingly, secrets and lies entwined like snakes in the grass. "Time to reveal who's really been pulling the strings," he sneered, scrolling through the files. "And it's not just Mercer." As images flashed across the screen, Maria felt a chill race down her spine. Every document pointed back to events she couldn't quite grasp, a network beyond her grasp, names she didn't recognize, but one darted to the forefront. Her own mother's name. "Mom?" The word escaped Maria's lips in disbelief, her eyes searching her mother for answers. "What is this?" Then another unexpected event transpired. Elena, rising from the shadows, clenched her fists. "No!" You didn't, she shouted at Eva, her voice filled with fury and heartbreak. How could you bring her, his daughter, into this mess? A chilling silence fell, the tension taut as a bowstring. Maria's world spun. Her mother's hidden life, the truth behind her disappearance, and this man's vendetta against Jonathan, all entwined into a horrific tapestry. No, it can't be, Maria gasped, the threads of her existence unraveling, leaving her gasping in the void of unanswered questions. As chaos erupted once more, sirens howling, tension pulsating, one thought burned across Maria's mind. Everything she thought she knew was built on lies. What had her mother hidden? What dark legacy was she now a part of? Then came a deafening crash from above, a second chandelier plummeting, threatening to change everything yet again. Would anyone escape the darkness wrapped around them, or would the truth bury them all? The weight of the night pressed in, and she felt herself teetering on the edge. Desperate F.